My name is Charles Klein until October 16, 2010. The worst day of my life was April 20th of that year. That was when I came home early from a business trip and found my wife of 6 years Haley in bed with Trent Miller. More on what happened on October 16th later. Haley's infidelity didn't completely surprise me. She had been unhappy with me and our lifestyle. The recent recession hit us hard and we were struggling with our mortgage. Our house was worth less than our debt. Haley wanted to quit, but I believed we could make it through. Frustratingly, she had insisted on buying a large house, and now most of our income went to mortgage payments. Since Christmas, when Haley was disappointed with her gift, she had been difficult. Nothing I did made her happy. The only joy in my life was our daughter Tina. Her happiness, when I came home, contrasted sharply with Haley's contempt. Marrying Haley was a mistake from the start. We were both coming out of FA relationships and rushed into marriage because we felt left out among our married friends. Despite our rocky start, I fell in love with Haley, especially after Tina was born. While some couples break up after having children, our bonds seem to strengthen, or so I thought. Turns out Haley was either a great actress or had a split personality. Until the end of last year, I believed we had a strong relationship and a happy family. Silly me. I told Haley I'd be back from my business trip on Thursday, but I returned on Wednesday. Haley worked mornings and was free in the afternoon. Since Tina was in school, I decided to surprise her. Driving down our street, I noticed an unfamiliar car. It was careless of Haley, but we didn't know many neighbors and most of the street was empty due to the housing crisis. I entered the house, not needing to be quiet because of the noise from the master bedroom. I stood for a few seconds, took some pictures on my phone, and felt overwhelming sadness realizing my marriage was over. We couldn't overcome the infidelity and betrayal. Now I had to how much worse our financial situation would get, and becoming a part-time father, I'd lose the chance to hug my daughter daily and love the woman I fell for. Haley saw me and screamed, "Get out of here, Charlie, what the hell are you doing home today?" Stunned, I reacted poorly. I grabbed Haley's hair, pulled her face close to mine, and yelled, "You're an idiot. You dare ask why I came home early? You're with that prick in my bed, and you attack me." I didn't notice Trent behind me during the chaos. He called emergency, and while we were still yelling, the cops arrived. Trent, wrapped in a sheet, met them at the door. They burst into the bedroom, saw I had pulled Haley's hair, and arrested me. After a few days I posted bail, only to find our accounts emptied and Haley gone with Tina. I returned to an empty house. When I got back to work on Monday, a bath was waiting. Haley had filed for divorce, accusing me of mental and physical misuse. I countersued for infidelity, but it didn't help. The courts awarded custody to Haley, and I had to pay child support and alimony. My credit tanked after selling the house. Though I still had my job, my life was a mess. If not for Tina, I would have left town. One positive note was being cleared of assault charges. I spent too many nights at Johnny's Tavern listening to drunks claim they wouldn't let this happen to them. Some said I wasn't much of a man for letting someone steal my wife. I switched bars after hearing fool, fool, fool too many times. Leaving the bar one night, I felt disrespected. My co-workers pied or despised me. I started considering the drunks' advice on revenge. They were full of bravado about how they'd retaliate against those who ruined my life. One Sunday, while visiting my parents with Tina, I shared my feelings of powerlessness over coffee. My parents were shocked, and my father broke the silence. "Do you want revenge, Charlie?" my dad asked. "I don't know, Dad. I just feel like I have to do something." Revenge is complicated, son. It seems to fill a void, but rarely does it. Can spiral out of control. You retaliate at, and then their friends or family strike back. Just ask any Chicago gang member how well the eye for an EY principle works. I generally respected my father's problem-solving approach, thinking before acting, but I didn't want to be betrayed. "Charlie, I'll be very disappointed if you seek revenge. I raised you better than that. Just forget it. Violence rarely solves problems." Despite my father's advice, one Saturday night, everything aligned. As I left my diner, I saw Trent and Haley across the street leaving an expensive restaurant. While waiting for the valet, they kissed. A beautiful Lexus pulled up, and they jumped in. As the car pulled away, I saw Haley's head drop into Trent's lap. I walked over to my old Chevy and sat down, cussing loudly and pounding the steering wheel. Once I calmed down, I turned the ignition. The car, the only one I could afford now that my finances were in ruins, barely started. I thought I had it all figured out. A few weeks later, I approached Trent at night. Before he knew it, I was punched and him in the ribs with a bat. I avoided his head, not wanting to eliminate him, just him. I swung again, and broke his right leg, then his right arm. As he lay on the ground trying to protect himself, I aimed for his groin. Someone shouted, "I've already called the police." I ran, tossing the bat jacket and mask into a dumpster 3 blocks away. The next time I picked Tina up, Haley asked directly, "Did you attack Trent?" I planned to make Haley sweat, so I just smirked without admitting or denying anything. I was the prime suspect, and the police questioned me multiple times. I had no alibi, and simply said I spent the evening alone in my apartment. There were no witnesses, and the weapon was never found. Only motive linked me to the crime. Then one of the drunks from Johnny got in trouble, and tried to cut a deal. He told the cops he knew who struck Trent with a bat, claiming I had bragged About it the drunk was lying, but the cops and didn't seem to care. I was charged with aggravated assault and attempted homicide with limited finances. I was assigned a public defender. The DA's case relied on circumstantial evidence and a drunk's false testimony. The jury found me not guilty of attempted homicide, but guilty of aggravated assault. I couldn't argue too hard. I had striken Trent with the bat. One thing worked in my favor. 3 months passed between the assault and sentencing, and Trent injuries had mostly healed by then. The judge gave me a lighter sentence, 5 years in medium security prison. What happened on October 16th? It was worse than catching my wife with Trent. That was the day I had to submit to my cellmate Ronald Iron Ron Young. I'm not bi and never had any desire to be with a man, but I had no choice. I ended up with no teeth, a broken nose, and 2 black eyes. Ron and his Aryan gang forced me into this prison relationship. Comply or die. 2 positives came from this nightmare. Ron's exclusivity meant I was off limits to other Aryans and protected from non-Aryan gangs. But what kind of sick system subjects prison to such misuse? I understand my 5-year sentence and loss of freedom, but why do we accept and even joke about the physical misuse of inmates? I didn't molest anyone, so why must I endure this to survive? Getting information from the outside is tough. After 6 months and many letters, my mother visited me. My dad still refused to talk to me, and my mom came not out of sympathy, but to vent. Haley married Trent and moved to Texas. They didn't let us see Tina before they left, and she was never allowed to come to the phone when we called. I haven't seen or talked to my only grandchild. I pleaded with Haley's mother, hoping for some understanding, but she laughed at me. Their family's cruelty is unbelievable. Mom, I never cheated on Haley. She cheated on me. All my letters to Tina came back unopened. I'm working with a prison attorney to get the judge to allow me to communicate with my daughter soon after. My mom softened, realizing how much I was hurting. She showed love for the rest of her visit and promised to return. I didn't tell her the worst parts of my incarceration, and she didn't ask. I won't detail those 5 years. I didn't re-educate myself, learn new skills, or become a better person. After a disastrous parole hearing, I learned to hide my emotions. In my first year as Iron Ron's cellmate, I gained strength at the gym, focusing my hatred on Ron, Haley, and Trent. My 61 inches frame became 210 pounds of muscle when Ron found a new mate. I was released to fend for myself. The first time they came for me, there were 2 of them. They strike me badly, but both ended up in the hospital, and I went to special housing for a month. Unfortunately, my first parole hearing was scheduled during that month and wasn't rescheduled. It took another 2 years to meet the parole board. During the hearing, I struggled to find the right words when a smug board member asked why I never apologized for bullying my ex-wife. I couldn't hold back and spat out all the venom that had built up inside me. I was married to Haley for 6 years and never raised a hand to her. She cheated on me in our bed. My one stupid act of attacking her boyfriend forced me to submit to another man to survive and fight off molate attempts. The justice system let her falsely accuse me of violence, take all our property, and prevented me from hiring a decent lawyer. It allows my ex-wife to deny me contact with my daughter. I served the full 5 years with no word from my daughter. My lawsuit against Haley went nowhere. I fought for my life every day. While I didn't learn new legal skills, I did learn how to swindle people online. I took a night job loading trucks for just over minimum wage, enough to stay off the streets during the day. I worked on a new computer creating the persona of Amy Carson, a widow building a humane shelter for pets. The Save Our Furry Friends website solicited donations, and with tens of thousands of email addresses, I managed to bring in some cash in 2 months. I had $21,000, enough for my post-prison goals. Candy Sweet was a vision on a bar stool. It had been over 6 years since I touched a woman. I had a clinic certificate and $700 in my pocket, dressed in Goodwill slacks and a sport coat. I approached her. Charlie, she smiled, wearing pants. Why pants, not a skirt? I wondered, since I was spending the night with this beautiful escort for $600 plus tip. The slack hit her prosthetic leg, which some customers had complained about. To get a discount, it didn't matter to me, but I was happy to save a couple of hundred. I ordered a shot of bourbon and sat next to Candy, who had a martini. The guy on her right gave me a dirty look. The gentleman next to me insisted on buying me this drink. Candy said I told him I was waiting for someone, so it wasn't necessary. Candy placed her hand on my shoulder, signaling me to stay calm. I counted to 5 and stayed composed. I pulled out a $20 bill. Excuse me, sir, I appreciate you buying my companion a drink, but could you kindly accept this as a repayment? I held the bill so he could see the scars on my hand, a reminder of prison fights. He smirked and took the $20. Can't blame a guy for trying with such a beautiful lady. Have a nice date, he said, then walked away. Candy thanked me for being a gentleman. Where did you learn to diffuse situations so well? She asked. It's too early to get into my life. story, and I've heard it's best not to ask escorts personal questions. Let's talk about these cabanas. When the bartender placed my bourbon in front of me, he said, "It's on the house, thanks for handling that politely. We had a fight here last week that cost me $400 in damages. I'll never see a dime from the drunk who caused it, and my insurance doesn't cover the full amount." I raised my glass to the bartender and took a sip. He had poured me a good one, Candy, and I finished our drinks, said goodbye, nodded to the other guy, and stepped out into the night air. "I have a room next door. Need anything to eat before we head over?" I asked. "No, I'm fine. Maybe we'll order pizza or Chinese food later. It's your money. We'll do whatever you want." I took Candy's hand and led her to the hotel. In the elevator, I couldn't stop smiling. Candy looked at me. "What?" she asked. "You're just so damn beautiful." We got to the room and got right to it. Afterward we rested. I wasn't expecting that. Candy looked at me again. "What?" she asked. "I didn't expect it to be so good, and for you to enjoy it so much." Candy laughed. "Well, I'm a professional." She kept laughing, but not at me anymore. "I've never paid for this before. I thought someone doing it for a living would have to pretend, but you didn't seem to be pretending." "Thank you. Do you want to order now?" We ordered Chinese food and showered. While we waited, I noticed her prosthetic leg for the first time. It was metal just below the knee. She saw me looking. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Actually no, it's amazing." When we walked to the room, I didn't notice any limp. We made love again and went to bed. In the morning we showered again, and she caught me looking at her prosthetic. "It was a motorcycle accident," she said. "What?" "My leg. Everyone wants to know how it happened. You were too polite to ask. I was told not to get personal, but now that you bring it up, how did it happen?" "The guy I was dating was Randy. He bought a new bike and wanted to show off, claiming he was a great rider. I was stupid and rode with him. He started showing off, lost control, and we went down. I lost my leg." "What happened to Randy?" "Neither of us wore helmets." "Another stupid decision. He damaged his head on a lamppost, went into a coma, and died a week later when they turned off the machine." "I know I sound cold, but he crashed, and now my leg is gone." "He didn't have insurance, so I had to cover all my medical bills. That's why I'm a strumpet." The worst part, my parents cut me out of their lives when they found out. They didn't want a strumpet for a daughter. There are worse things than getting paid for love making. Like what? Like my ex-wife, for example. So I told Candy about Haley. She agreed my ex was worse, and called her an even bigger strumpet. All I could do was laugh, probably for the first time. "Are you hungry? Can I buy you breakfast?" I asked. "Yeah, that would be nice. Then I have to get to CLS. I'm not going to be a strumpet forever." You hear about guys falling in love with Tyson and with someone like Candy. I understand why, but let's be realistic. She's a Corey-san, and even if she wasn't, what could I offer any woman? The following day, I eagerly anticipated the second part of my plan. I met Jan Price at a downtown diner, won an outside liaison for a black prison gang named a Price, and I agreed on one condition: when the knife slit his throat, 2 names, mine and Johansson's, would be whispered in his ear. Once Jan agreed, I handed him $115,000 yuan, was one of the smartest accused, but never convicted. I knew what was happening inside. "I can't blame you for wanting revenge. It's not revenge, it's justice." Johansson was a good guy. About a year after he became Young's plaything, he died. Rumors on the yard said Ron held the kid's head too long and strangled him. Johansson deserved better. Young spent 2 months in solitary and was jailed for not reporting Johann's end of life until the next morning. That's it. Whatever the reason, he's a dead man, and you know no one will ever find out about our deal, right? I understand. I haven't lasted 5 years by talking too much. One nodded and left. 4 days later, 4 inmates were eliminated in a prison riot triggered by the stabbing. End of life of Arian Ronald Iron. Ron Young. 1 inmate was suspected of the homicide and was eliminated in the riot. The prison closed for 3 days. The Amy Carson website had run its course. I shut it down before law enforcement noticed and started maltreating me. It was a small matter now, with too little money involved for any agencies to investigate. My focus shifted to finding Tina. Haley's Facebook page had disappeared 2 years ago. The last post said their family lived in the Dallas suburbs. Tina had just turned 9, and the happy family. Haley, Trent, and Tina posed in front of Disneyland's gates. Then nothing. Imagine my surprise when, just for fun, I googled Trent Miller and found he was living in Chicago again. Nothing came up on Haley, but at least I had a lead. It cost a private investigator $1,000 of my illicit earnings to find out where Trent lived and worked, that he no longer lived with my ex, and where he hung out after work. It took Trent a few minutes to recognize me sitting next to him at the bar. Understandable, since I looked different from the last time he saw me during my sentencing for striking him with a Louisville Slugger. My muscular build, smashed nose, and sharp-shaved head probably looked intimidating. He turned to me and asked, "Are we going to have a problem?" I had thought about the question and prepared an answer. "No, Trent striking you with a baseball bat was a mistake. It cost me 5 years of freedom, countless horrors in prison, and the pleasure of watching my little girl grow up. I came to ask if you know where Tina is. I'd tell you if I did. Haley left me for another guy, and The three of them left for parts unknown. I watched Trent's eyes as he answered, "In prison you learn to make eye contact, because eyes are the windows to the soul." I believe Trent was telling the truth to reinforce my intuition. Trent continued, "Charlie, I shouldn't have gotten involved with Haley. While she was still married to you, it was wrong. I really loved Haley, and thought she loved me. It hurt like hell when she left me for that guy. It was the first time I understood how you felt when we started dating. She fed me lies that I didn't realize until I came back here and talked to some couples you used to know. When I first met Haley, she told me you misused her, and Tina said your marriage was a sham, and it was only a matter of time before she died or divorced you. I thought I was her knight in shining armor. When you strike me, it only reinforced her story." Trent sipped his beer and continued, "I disagreed with Haley when she cut you and your family out of Tina's life. I thought it was a mistake. Haley told me to back off, that Tina wasn't my child and I had no say. Tina and I had a good relationship during those 3 years. I loved her, but I was never her daddy. Tina missed you." I tried not to cry when Trent said that, but my eyes watered. Trent asked the bartender for a pen and paper. "I don't know where they ended up, but here's the name of the guy who replaced me, Barry Stewart. He was a carpenter hired by a Plano real estate developer, Chase Homes. He was working on homes a block away from our house. I have no idea how he and Haley met. I found out when a neighbor called to ask why Haley was loading his truck. I got home just before they left. We were yelling when the cops arrived. I recognized his name in place of employment because of the police they left, and I found a note in the kitchen saying goodbye. Our accounts were cleaned out. I spent thousands trying to find Haley, but got nowhere. A year later, I sued for infidelity and abandonment, sold the house, and moved here." Trent's face showed resentment as he told his story. He still held a grudge against Haley and me. "All I wanted was to see my daughter." I thanked Trent for the information, bought him a beer, and left the bar pondering my next move. Trent had spent thousands looking for Haley. Why should I waste my limited resources doing the same? There was one person who likely knew where Haley and Tina were, Haley's mother. However, she would probably prevent me from finding out. It was risky. If caught, I'd be sent back to prison, but I couldn't think of another way. Margaret Turner was a creature of habit, always attending church every Sunday at 9 a.m. She always left a spare house key in the faux stone by the patio door. Why bother with a spare key when Brutus, her Rottweiler, was always there at 9:02? I climbed over the fence from the alley behind her house. The key was in place. I opened the patio door and heard Brutus growl, a sound that would have scared anyone else. Brutus came around the corner into the kitchen where I stood, hoping he remembered me. It had been 6 years since Brutus had last seen me, but years didn't matter. Brutus rose up on his hind legs and licked my face. He remembered the man who had picked him up at the shelter, brought him to Margaret's house, trained him, and gave him treats. While Brutus was reacquainting himself with me, I walked over to the counter, took a dog treat from the jar, and threw it on the floor. Brutus scrambled to get it. I took advantage of the pause to look around. The kitchen hadn't changed since J.N. Turner died 9 years ago. A computer on Margaret's desk was where she paid the bills. I turned it on, and a password prompt appeared. After a moment's thought, I typed John 3:16. The computer began to boot up. While it was starting, I went through the drawers and found some letters with return address. Haley lived in El Paso. I inserted a flash drive into the USB port and copied Margaret's photo, video, and email folders. After getting everything I came for, I shut down the computer. Scratched Brutus behind the ears, closed the door, and replaced the key. I spent the rest of Sunday watching videos and pictures of my daughter growing up. Tina had grown so much. She was such a beautiful young girl. I felt like a fool for missing those years. From the envelopes and emails, I learned that Haley and Tina now had the last named Turner. Haley lived with Barry Stewart, but wasn't married to him. Tina was in 5th grade. On Monday, I gave the information in a $500 deposit to a private investigator in El Paso who confirmed the address and other details were current. Tuesday morning after work, I knocked on my parents' door. Although my mother had visited me in prison, I hadn't seen my father since my sentencing. Back then he had looked at me with sadness and pain. Now he stood at the door, and I wondered if he would let me in. "Hi, Dad." Dad opened the door wide and pulled me into the house. He looked me in the eyes and then hugged me. "Mary, Charlie's home." Mom came into the room and hugged me too. "Would you like some coffee?" "Yes, please." We sat down at the same kitchen table where I used to eat lunch as a child. Margaret Turner wasn't the only one who liked routines. "Mom, Dad, first, let me apologize for letting you down. I'm sorry I didn't listen to your wise words. I'm sorry that I let a bunch of losers convince me to get revenge." Mom hugged me again, and Dad put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed. "I know where Haley and Tina are, and I want you to help me re-establish contact with Tina. I have a few $1,000 to go to El Paso and do whatever it takes to at least get visitation rights. Will you come with me and help?" Dad answered, "First, what are you planning to do?" "Nothing violent." "Right." I was hurt that my past actions made that his first question. "No, I'm going to consult the lawyer first. I've done my time. I'm not a parole, Lou, so I can go in and try to get a court order for visitation, but let's be honest, I'm an ex-convict convicted of assault. I think it would be best if my parents came with me," and the three of us filed an appeal. Dad looked at Mom, and I saw the pleading in her eyes. She didn't need to say a Word Dad agreed. When do we go? Can you be ready in a week? I need to give notice at work and settle some things. Can we take your car? We'll need wheels while we're there. Yeah, I'll take it to the shop tomorrow and make sure it's ready to go. We'll head out next Monday. Okay with that. I had another cup of coffee and caught up on some family gossip. It felt good to be home again. Over the next few days I used my free time to find the best family lawyers in the El Paso area. After finding one with great reviews, I called and made an appointment for the following Thursday. That gave us 3 full days to drive to El Paso. I hopped. Dad and Mom could make the trip. Dad was almost 70 and Mom was 66. Dad's Lincoln Continental. Turns out good old Mom is a big Matthew McConaughey fan. It would have been the perfect car for the trip, but when Dad found out about the Thursday appointment, we all agreed to leave on Sunday and have an extra day to cover the 1,500 miles that Sunday. A 36-year-old man set out on the trip with my mother and father. We drove out of town. It's all freeways now, but years ago it was Route 66. Before we entered St. Louis, Dad told us how when he was only 3 his parents drove that road to Los Angeles. Back then all the roads were 2-lane roads. You couldn't drive more than 400 m in a day. It took the family 7 days to get to Los Angeles. It seems my grandfather, who died before I was born, had a job waiting for him in California. One of his army buddies was in the painting business. After the war, with all the new buildings being built, it was supposed to be a gold mine. Unfortunately, Dad said his mom, my grandmother, was homesick the whole year they lived in Pasadena. My grandfather packed up the family and returned to Rhine. Everything ended up working out for the best. My grandfather became the CEO of an aluminum smelter. He was doing well until he was found hunched over his desk, dead of a heart attack at 58. I was born a year later and named in his honor. During the 4 days we spent in the car, Mom and Dad shared more stories about the old days, stories I had either forgotten or was too busy to listen to. Growing up, I moved away when I was 18, so this was the longest we had spent together since our last vacation to Washington, D.C. When I was 14, on Thursday afternoon, we arrived at the LA office of Gladys Hopper. Unlike my previous encounters with the law, this was a positive experience. I told the lawyer everything: how I was convicted, my time in jail, the lack of communication with Tina, how my parents were also deprived of contact, my divorce from Haley, her subsequent marriage, and her divorce from Trent. The lawyer's eyes lit up when she heard that Trent was suing for infidelity and child abandonment. It wasn't a pretty picture, but it didn't make Haley look like an angel either. The lawyer's reluctance to take our case vanished when my mother nearly broke down in tears, explaining how she couldn't hold on to her granddaughter. I gave the lawyer a deposit and she started